Lando Norris just lost everything in a single night and the entire championship has been flipped upside down. A microscopic measurement under his car triggered a decision so extreme that it instantly reopened the world title fight with only 2 races left. You are about to hear how a quiet inspection in Las Vegas became the biggest plot twist of the entire season and handed Max Verstappen a chance that nobody thought he still had. Stay right here because this moment is so dramatic that it could decide who becomes world champion in 2025. The instant the technical inspection concluded in Las Vegas, the atmosphere shifted from routine post-race activity to a state of absolute shock because the officials discovered that both McLaren cars had floor wear below the legal 9mm limit. This revelation arrived quietly at first as engineers analyzed the data in isolation, yet within minutes it became clear that the numbers pointed to a decisive breach. Norris and Piastri had finished the race believing they had secured valuable points for the championship and the constructors' table, but the inspection revealed a reality that neither they nor the team had anticipated. Their performances on track were now in the hands of the regulatory system. As the data reached the officials, the measurements showed complete consistency, a detail that left no margin for appeal or reinterpretation. When a skid block falls under the minimum thickness, the regulation mandates exclusion regardless of intention or circumstance, and that rule has been applied in every similar case across the 2025 season. The officials followed their established procedure, repeated the inspection with additional witnesses, and verified each reading with certified equipment. The certainty of the data removed any flexibility and transformed the result of the race hours after the checkered flag had fallen. The impact on the paddock was immediate because the disqualification of both McLarens is one of the rarest outcomes in modern Formula One. Teams instantly recognized the significance of the ruling as they recalculated the standings in real time and realized how severe the consequences were for the championship narrative. Norris had believed he was strengthening his hold on the title with a second-place finish, yet those points vanished before sunrise. Piastri, who had maintained mathematical hopes with his 4th-place result, saw his total reset as well, placing him under new pressure for the final rounds of the year. This sudden reversal placed Max Verstappen at the heart of the conversation because the gap that had seemed too large to overcome hours earlier contracted dramatically. Instead of trailing Norris by more than 40 points, the Dutch driver now found himself only 24 points behind with 60 points still available in the final 2 races and the Qatar sprint. This change re-energized his championship bid and created a fresh dynamic that will define the closing weeks of the season. The shift was not gradual but instantaneous, driven entirely by the technical facts uncovered beneath both McLaren floors. The shock resonated through the media as commentators and analysts sought to understand how such a critical error could occur during a championship fight. McLaren had established a reputation for precision throughout the season, and their pace in Las Vegas had suggested full control of their performance. Yet the inspection revealed that a technical detail as small as the thickness of the skid block could override everything achieved on track. This is where Formula One demonstrates its unforgiving nature, where the combination of engineering, regulation, and pressure can collide without warning. As teams packed their equipment for the long journey to Qatar, the narrative of the season had been rewritten. Norris went from a driver defending a comfortable advantage to one under direct attack. Piastri moved from contender to survivor as he now shared equal points with Verstappen. And Verstappen, who had left the race assuming he had only reduced the deficit slightly, discovered that his title hopes had been revived by a ruling delivered long after the roar of the engines had faded. This is the new context in which the championship will be decided, shaped by a technical detail that changed everything. The officials recorded the exact measurements under both McLaren floors with a level of precision that removed every possible doubt about the violation. Oscar Piastri's car displayed readings of 8.96 mm at the front left reference point, 8.74 at the front right, and 8.90 at the rear right. Each value fell below the legal minimum of 9 mm established by the technical regulations. These figures were gathered using certified instruments that can detect variations far smaller than the thickness of a human hair, and that accuracy transformed the inspection into an indisputable confirmation rather than a matter open to debate. Lando Norris's car followed the same pattern when the officials measured the critical surfaces under his chassis. The readings of 8.88 mm on the front right and 8.93 mm on the rear right placed his car outside the legal margin as well. These measurements were performed in the presence of 3 McLaren representatives who observed the process from start to finish. When the team requested a second verification, the officials repeated the procedure with new observers present and obtained identical numbers. That repetition eliminated any chance of procedural error and positioned the ruling within the clearest section of the regulation. The rule governing skid block thickness is non-negotiable because it sits at the core of aerodynamic fairness. When a car runs lower than the minimum threshold, it gains unintended performance under high load, even if the team did not seek that advantage deliberately. For this reason, the regulation does not analyze intent or circumstance. It merely defines the legal boundary and applies the mandatory penalty when the car falls outside of it. Earlier events in the season involving other teams established a precedent that left the officials with no discretionary power. The only possible decision was disqualification for both cars. The timeline of the discovery intensified the shock because the ruling arrived more than 4 hours after the checkered flag. During that time, McLaren believed their second place and fourth place finishes stood as legitimate results that would extend Norris's championship lead. Meanwhile, Verstappen completed his post-race duties unaware that the standings were about to be recalculated entirely. When the officials released the final document confirming the exclusions, the paddock shifted immediately into analysis mode as the magnitude of the development became clear. What had seemed like a routine update to the points table became the turning point of the season. Once the points were recalculated, the full impact revealed itself. Instead of leading Verstappen by more than 40 points, Norris dropped to 390 points while Verstappen and Piastri moved equal on 366 each. This reduction to a 24-point margin transformed the final 2 races and the Qatar sprint into decisive battlegrounds. The numbers demonstrated that the championship was no longer under McLaren control. Verstappen suddenly needed consistent finishes rather than perfect weekends, and Piastri remained alive in the standings with a mathematical path that still existed despite the setback. The psychological shift added another layer to the situation. Norris moved from a position of command to one where he now must defend against 2 challengers who both gained momentum at his expense. Piastri lost points but gained new motivation because the gap to his teammate remained the same 24 points and Verstappen now shared his total, creating a new rivalry within the rivalry. Verstappen, who left Las Vegas expecting a small gain, discovered that his title hopes had been reignited by a ruling delivered long after the roar of the race had subsided. The facts turned a single measurement into the catalyst for a brand new championship fight. The technical explanation for the disqualification begins with the behavior of ground effect cars, which rely on stable aerodynamic platforms that depend entirely on precise ride height control. When a car experiences unexpected oscillation at high speed, it causes the floor to strike the track surface repeatedly, and this repeated contact accelerates the erosion of the skid block. According to the information provided by McLaren, the team encountered levels of porpoising in Las Vegas that far exceeded their predictions. This created vertical movement that forced the underside of the car into the asphalt with greater frequency than their models anticipated, and over the course of 50 laps this produced were beyond the allowable range. The limited practice running across the weekend made the problem more severe. The first day of the event was heavily disrupted by weather, and the second day featured long stoppages due to issues with the circuit infrastructure. These interruptions reduced the amount of laps that McLaren could use to calibrate the behavior of the car under full load. Ride height calculations depend on consistent data because the engineering team must estimate how much the car compresses at top speed. Without adequate practice laps, the estimates become more dependent on simulations rather than real-world feedback. In a championship fight, even small gaps in data can produce unexpected consequences. McLaren argued that minor contact early in the race may have introduced additional complications that contributed to the excessive wear. Oscar Piastri suffered a collision in the opening corner that damaged his tire and forced him to pit earlier than planned. Although the visible damage was limited to the wheel assembly, the team suggested that the impact could have shifted components connected to the floor or altered the stiffness of the lower structure. Even a very small displacement can influence the way the floor presses against the track surface. However, the officials made clear that accidental damage does not change the responsibility to present a legal car and therefore does not reduce the penalty. The characteristics of the Las Vegas circuit also played a major part in the outcome. Its long straights allow the car to remain at top speed for extended periods, which increases aerodynamic load and compresses the suspension consistently. This creates a situation where the skid block remains closer to the asphalt for much longer than on conventional circuits. During the event, tire wear was much lower than expected, which allowed both McLaren drivers to push at higher intensities without the usual need to conserve grip. These conditions increased the stress on the skid block and magnified the effect of the team's aggressive ride height strategy. The officials reviewed all the data presented by McLaren and applied the procedure defined by the technical directive. They repeated each measurement with additional team representatives present and confirmed that the values remained below the legal minimum. The equipment used is certified with an accuracy that surpasses the scale of the violation, which removed any possibility of measurement error. The officials also referenced prior cases from the same season where similar breaches resulted in identical penalties. Consistency in the application of the rules is essential for competitive fairness, and once the readings were verified, the officials had no authority to apply any penalty other than exclusion.